What happens when nobody can afford anything? Go look at underdeveloped countries to see. People die of preventable diseases. People die of lack of food and exposure. Education rates go down while people choose working over higher education. You get multiple generations living in the same household. People repair cars for decades instead of buying. Most people don't have disposable income, so there is less business for restaurants or shopping. The distance between the rich and the poor gets wider. Ever heard of a company town? You'd have a mine, for example, and a town built by the mine owner nearby. All the businesses in the town would be owned by the company. The workers wouldn't get paid enough to buy what they needed, so credit would be issued. In no time everyone that worked at the mine would be so in debt that they couldn't leave and get a new job if they wanted to. They didn't have any means to pay off their debt. Well, the CEO of one of the largest private prisons in the US is currently salivating in anticipation over the promise of the most significant growth in our company's history, if that tells you anything. People will probably turn against each other before turning against the rigged system. Back before the same 5 corporations owned everything that would have caused competitive pricing, and is ideally how capitalism works. You'd undercut the other guy and get on some neutral ground until the only consideration was product quality and store distance. In today's odd situation, I'd imagine those 5 core would just lobby bribe government officials to pass social welfare programs to essentially launder our own tax dollars back to them. I'm not an economist, but I am a reformed criminal, and this is what makes sense to me. We party like it's 1789. Armored Cybertrucks. The answer is fucking goddamn armored Cybertrucks. It absolutely does not matter if people can afford a product if you can make that product contractually required by law. It seems like right now, the super rich expect some number of the old, poor, and those dependent on expensive medical procedures and medications to die. Then you will have some company towns like the one that Elon is building, and eventually stuff like you see in Black Mirror, with people signing away agency and freedom in service of their debts. I am interested to see where the survival dividing line is. Where does someone comfortable with a high 6-figure salary, decent 401k etc., today ends up as the bodies fall? How much money and how many resources are enough? The third world is what happens. Mostly what I've noticed is they just make things for rich people exclusively. Boutique stuff becomes the norm as the middle class shrinks. Occasionally they'll make stuff with the masses in mind, but usually they just aim for upper middle class or higher. When consumer buying diminishes, the billionaires get handouts due to lower profits. At least that's what it looks like from down here. I was there when Soviet Union collapsed. What my family did was to get some land and grow potatoes and vegetables. To compare, the inflation was 2000 back then compared to about 10, so things are not nearly as bad as they could be. On the other hand, when the collapse comes, it can come suddenly and quickly. Buy some rice. Millions become homeless and are probably gotten rid of in some way. Millions more spend every waking second working to be allowed to survive. The rich do whatever they want and everyone else obeys or dies. Basically, US will turn into a Brazil or Mexico with a tiny middle class, with the norm being super rich or very poor. This unless some kind of basic income is instituted, but doubtful with men with no regard for other humans like Elon Musk running the country. Well, my understanding is that throughout history, 2 things have taken place in these situations when people stop being able to fill their bellies. Either the invisible hand of the marketplaces eases pricing in the consumer marketplace, or a revolution ensues. An expert on history or economics could probably give a better answer than I can, but when people don't spend, it puts downward price pressure on products and services. If that price floor is reached and something prevents the marketplace from balancing, the king collects too much in taxes. For instance, people will turn to fighting for their lives. They make it illegal to be poor. Now you can get arrested for sleeping in your car, fines for sleeping in your own land if it's not done in a way they can exploit you. So you either will have to eat worse and live with more people, try to circumvent the system, and go to jail, or be one of the few ones that make it by providing what the rich want. Some think that once machines can do everything and humans are priced out of the market, the system will create universal basic income to keep itself going. However, this assumes a lot of goodwill from those at the top with no precedents to support it. What could happen, and we do have precedents for, is we regress back to a form of noble society that is completely separate from peasant society, roaming bands of homeless and criminals, serfdoms, and possibly slavery. People killing each to do jobs so indecent that the rich won't even use their machines to do them. Out of the piles of trash ghettos, there might emerge an industrious working class that forms some semblance of a society. There will be challenges to the status quo, possible wars, and the cycle repeats itself. Or we somehow break the cycle, stop allowing the hoarding of wealth, and share in humanity's peak. The cynic in me says that a deep recession with plenty of pain for most of us will be favored by the top 1 because the biggest corporations will further solidify their market dominance as smaller businesses close. But at some point there is a breaking point. The big corporations need us little people to buy their goods and services, so if they inflict too much pain on us, they will be shooting themselves in the foot. It appears MAGA has every intention of finding that line though. Think of countries with very poor populations, no access to decent education or health care. That's where they are taking the US. The wealthy live nice lives while the rest struggle to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. There will always be those of us that can afford it. Even with real estate people are still buying it daily, it's just much harder for those that are middle class to do it. However, those that are wealthy with a good job will continue living and not notice much of a difference.